The stories in this presentation come from the book Breach of Peace Portraits of the 1961 Mississippi Freedom Riders by Eric Etheridge. In the spring of summer of 1961, several hundred Americans, blacks and whites, men and women, converged on Jackson, Mississippi to challenge state segregation laws. The Freedom Riders, as they came to be known, were determined to open up the South to civil rights. It was illegal for bus and train stations to discriminate, but most did and were not interested in change. Over 300 people were arrested and convicted of the charge, breach of the peace. My mom, Patricia Smith, pictured here, told me stories about the Freedom Rides and the time she had with the core group for civil rights. And I grew up thinking about not only the trials and tribulations she had, but also the fact that everyone was fighting for civil rights. So today I wanted to pick some people from this book and narrate their stories and things from their point of view and point out how it was amazing to also have allies back then. Donna Garda. My family was a regular New England family. We had conversations about corn and how many jars of jam we'd put up in parchment. We shared the mail that we got on the cell block. People would read their letters. I read my letter and it said, Dad planted 10 rows of corn and the corn's really good this year. And Grandma's fine and blah, blah, blah. Somebody said, what does it mean? Are these codes? This is code, right? And I said, no, this is real. It was so funny because other people were much more sophisticated. This was the summer of the Berlin crisis, and people had even set up different codes for their letters, meaning East Berlin or West Berlin. Peggy Oakley. We were interviewed by an FBI agent at some point after being arrested. That was kind of strange. He wanted to know, why are you doing this? I said something about defending some amendment. I can't even remember. I keep thinking the 14th Amendment, but I don't know if that's the appropriate one or not. He said, don't you know nobody believes in those things anymore? David Morton. I had a nice apartment, a cute girlfriend, and one day Zev Ayanoli calls me up and says, hey, you want to go to jail? How can I explain? I was raised radical. I'm still a radical. My kids are radicals. Trust me. My parents weren't commies, but they were radical. We met on the quad on the steps, Zev and me and Claire O'Connor, and so forth. Here comes Marv Davidoff. He's just walking through the campus and I wave at him because he's a buddy of mine. Okay, once and always. He came over. The next thing you know, he decided to join the rest of us and go get thrown in jail. Well, what did he do the rest of his life, huh? Political activist. I teased him. I said, you were just walking by. You had no idea. That became his life's work. Russell and Mary Jorgensen. I told everybody that I was going to go to jail and I was going to look like a Southern lady, which I did. And I think that's why Captain J.L. Ray called me in, because he couldn't understand it. I had a hat with a veil, white gloves, white shoes, and a lovely dress, so I felt comfortable going in and talking to him. I'd been arrested a few times already. I wasn't afraid of the police department. We must have talked for 45 minutes or an hour. He wanted to know what was going on in Berkeley. He wanted to know why I came, and I told him. After we talked a while, I asked him, I said, well, what do you like to do when you're not in the police department? And he said, I like to go fishing. So I said, well, we live in Berkeley and the wharf's not far from us and a lot of fishermen there. I guess it's a good catch. If you want to come up and stay with us, you'd be welcome to go fishing. He was friendly, asked questions. He really wanted to know. He was not at all like the other people we met in town. I think he'd been softened because later, when we went back to Jackson with many other Freedom Riders to get arraigned, he was in the police line, and people were so friendly to him and shaking hands. I heard he had to leave the police line. I think it just got to him, and he knew that it was wrong what was happening. Mary Jorgensen. Charles Sellers. When I was in high school, I went to a double ACP meeting in a black church, which was packed with 300 or 400 people. An imposing gentleman who was introduced as Bishop Gordon of the AME Zion Church, got up and preached the most powerful sermon I had ever heard. I was one of the only 2 or 3 white people in this enormous congregation, and I guess this was a scales falling from my eyes kind of experience that I never got over. I was in dissent with my society from that time on. Paul Breen's. When I was a freshman at the University of Wisconsin, I pledged a fraternity. At the pledge dinner, I got up and said, "Hey, these students in the South are sitting in. Have you been reading about this?" I had a hat for the occasion. I said, "I want to pass around a hat and raise some money. I'm not sure where we send it, but I think they could use some funds and I'll find out." My pledge father knocked the hat out of my hand and called me an N-word lover. I soon met a girl whom I subsequently married. She was a left-winger from New York. She said, "What is that on your sweater?" I said, "A pledge pin." She said, "What?" I said, "What's wrong?" She said, "Don't you know what fraternities are?" My education was beginning. She had enormous impact on me. "What don't you change with your life? Why are you such a jerk with a pledge pin and hanging out with these dodos? What about the Socialist Club?" I said, "Socialist Club? What's that?" Soon I was on the picket lines at Woolworths in Madison, being called an N-word lover again, and being told to go back to the Soviet Union. These are some of the stories of the allies from the Civil Rights era. There are so many more allies that this video would go on for hours and hours. So many stories to tell. But in the end, the theme that I continue to go with every Black History Month is that Black history is American history. And there are people throughout the ages that have stepped up to help those that were underserved in society, and sometimes leaving their names in history books. But wait, there's more. I made a video a couple of years ago about my mom in the civil rights area, so we'll finish with that. Hello, Mom.
Hi.
How you doing? I just wanted to ask you a couple of questions. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Day is coming up, and I wanted to talk to you a little bit about your history in the civil rights movement. When did you join the civil rights movement?
I joined in my senior year in high school when I was 17 years old. The freedom rides were starting. We were starting to desegregate New Orleans, and I just wanted to do it.
What motivated you to join?
Well, coming up in segregated South, I think I was always motivated. But seeing an opportunity to be a part of the change that I always wanted gave me motivation to actually get out there and do something. I wanted to be a part of it.
That's cool. Did you ever meet Dr. King?
I met him when I was 18 years old. He came to New Orleans to meet those of us in the planning commission, which I was planning committee, which I was a part of, because we were deciding what to do about desegregating New Orleans and interstate travel on national highways. So I met him at Aretha Castle's house. She was our leader, as well as Rudy Lombard. He came to meet us and to meet the pastors in the churches who were housing freedom riders, because it was our job to house them for 2 weeks between when they came from Mississippi in Parchman Prison and to be set free.
Well, that's awesome. And now all these years later, how do you feel about the way things are now? Do you feel like the work that you all did has led to improvements, or how do you feel about the modern day?
Okay, I'm optimistic. I hear a lot of criticism that what we did didn't work. I don't feel that way at all. I know that it worked because I watched it work along the way. And I really, really, really like the new generation. I've seen generations come who are not believing in the stereotype. They're not thinking about the stereotype. They're meeting people, addressing people, and they're accepting people as people. I think that it worked, and I like the new look. I hope I'm right.
Well, I think you are. I want to thank you so much for what you did in the past for civil rights movement, and thank you for everything you've done. So I appreciate it.
Happy for you too.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'm happy about you as well. I got a good son. Don't tell anybody I said that. Oh, that's right. You can tell him. And I'm proud of you.
Thank you so much. And happy King Day.
Happy King Day.
Woo!
Yay! King Day.